Welcome back, Poggers, to another episode of the Pog State. I'm your host, Atlas. I'm joined by Valdes, Chronicler, and Wolf. Man, I can't believe that we're nearing the end of the summer season for 2022. Time flies when you're having a really good time. And speaking of things that are flying, it's not Cubby, who has recently joined us. He is still in North America, trapped in having to work extraordinarily early hours. How was it with Cubby's first week, gentlemen?
It was fun, yeah. I really liked having him on the show. I enjoyed seeing him in amateur. He joined the co-stream once, so like then at that point, like, I'm not very hard to please, you know. Like
this is our recruitment process. You join Chronicler's Challenger co-stream, and then you join the LCK. That's actually how it goes.
Who's next?
I can't tell you guys.
Is it Gulborg? I know Gulborg was on the show.
That'll spoil the surprise. Jamada was there as well.
Yeah, that's
we've got Ox. Yeah,
no, it was great. I think that having another analyst actually really adds to the show. Like, I wasn't sure what to expect. I was actually a little bit nervous because, it's harder, especially with the remote and trying to like manage
Delay
everything.
was hard. Delay was really hard.
As the hosts, it was a little bit difficult, but it was very rewarding, and I thought it added a lot to the show. And Cubby, just in general, has been great. So, yeah,
I'm enjoying the early stages of Cubby having some different opinions than us and having his own ideas until he eventually just has the same thoughts about the meta and the LCK as all of us because he gets involved on it so much. In all seriousness, I thought it was really good having him on the show. I thought he did a great job. Really like his voice. And I also think the desk is just better with 3 people, and eventually, hopefully, he'll be here on site so we can kind of do the desk as it was always meant to be. Because we're kind of following a 3-person Korean desk, right? So it makes more sense to have like a dedicated host, 2 analysts. So looking forward to the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually think that the 3-person desk situation is super good. And I think it's really cool to be able to have like different opinions instead of it just being like, it's like we've got the casting desk with host and analyst, and then we throw to a different casting desk. And so having the dynamic, like the trio dynamic is actually really, really cool. Anyway, let's move towards the meat of the show. Let's get into playoffs. Wolf, I'm going to start with you. Give us what your take is on the relative strength of our playoff contention teams. Do you think Kwangdong's going to make it in? And what's the difference between like T1 Genji and the rest, I guess?
I think T1 and Genji have a much stronger read not only on the early macro game, but also just on when their compositions are stronger. And I think this has been an issue that has plagued most of our bottom of the playoffs and teams who did not make playoffs, is just not knowing when their composition spikes, when they're at its strongest, trying to force fights around the wrong objectives or not setting up proper vision control. I think T1 and Genji are in their own tier above. I think Live Sandbox is kind of knocking on the door a little bit. But for me, my biggest takeaway for playoffs was every single summer season since I've joined, the last 2 major ones, right? We've had teams that are looking like they're on the trajectory for playoffs, looking like maybe they could be a hopeful upset team, like maybe this team could break through into the top 3, and then they fall off at the last possible moment. I think the pressure gets to them. Live Sandbox and DRX, right? And the pressure gets to them, the ability to maintain that consistent form kind of falls off. But we saw 2 teams, Live Sandbox and KT Rolster, not fall into that trap this season, and in fact grew and improved. And in the final moments here, they're looking better than they really ever have since I've joined the league. So that's been a big standout for me, is just watching these teams grow and evolve and change. And then at the other side of things, we are seeing DRX fall. Like, they are actually falling into the trap that Live Sandbox and we've seen KT do in the past, where you get a little bit enthusiastic, let's say, and then it all falls apart.
Good choice.
For DRX, I think it's been a very disappointing end, and I was really hopeful for DRX in the first few weeks. This was a top 4 team. We were like, man, this team might be top 3. Deft is having a big resurgence in his last season, and unfortunately at the end, they just haven't been able to stick the landing.
Yeah, I agree. What is the coolest thing to what we're seeing right now, and I hope this further crystallizes as we get into playoffs, is that it feels though, even though we have clear tiers still, I think, T1 got 2-0 by Genji, I'd still expect that to be a very competitive series once they meet in playoffs. I don't have any expectations of that being a one-sided series either way, even with how good Genji looked. But what and then you have kind of KT, Damwon, and Sandbox, which I think are now in a tier of their own. I don't think Damwon is in their own little third place spot anymore with the performance that they have shown. Although the Bible factor actually has been pretty promising, which I really like, of course, for obvious reasons. Although I was expecting Dogdom and Kellen to kind of get it together at some point and didn't really come through yet. But what I'm really hoping is that we continue to see a crystallization of our teams into different niches, where you have a very bot-focused team in Gen G, where it's also clear that the weakest player is Doran, which against non-top teams isn't going to matter, but for like actual deep runs in tournaments it is, because you'll face up against a team where the top side of the map is the strongest, which is T1. And then Liv Sandbox is playing a style that is very reminiscent of RNG if you copy them like 3 times, where you have a lot more of the weaknesses are very pronounced, so the laning phase isn't great. We're seeing that Dove is still struggling a lot and has actually been successfully targeted, as we saw at time of recording yesterday against KT. But they play a very similar style where it's really heavy on the mid-game team fights and like mid-game taking tempo back, taking control. And I think it's really good in the LCK that not every team is playing the same way, and I'm hoping that that continues, because I think that that is one of the biggest advantages that the LPL has over our region, right? Is that every LCK team often plays kind of similar, and I'm hoping that teams continue developing their own niche.
Diversification. What do you reckon, Valdes?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that yesterday, right, with Liv Sandbox versus KT. That was one of the most entertaining series. There were a couple of games that were very one-sided, but it was kind of based off of both teams checking each other mechanically over and over. And it wasn't just that, but it was nice to see that kind of added in, especially not just in the play, but also in the picks that they were going for, like Rascal going heavy on the counter pick, saying, okay, I'm going to outplay you in the top side. He did that multiple times. And just having them kind of mix it up, because I think that Gen G is extremely dominant just because as a team they've really come together. They took a split in spring to try to figure it out, and now it's like really come together, whereas T1, you know, still very strong, but I do feel like Gen G is a pretty clear number one in my mind right now. Yeah. But I also don't really feel like Gen G are doing as much of what Liv Sandbox and KT are doing. Like, they have kind of that style, and it looks very stompy because they are just so much better than every other team. But I do feel like, who knows what happens in a best of 5 if, you know, Rascal all of a sudden is like, yeah, I'm picking counter pick Yorick or something random, you know. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I just like the idea of like, oh, we're not just going to go through playoffs and it's going to be like, okay, 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, and then like maybe 3-1, and it's just going to be decided. Like, our middle of the pack teams seem very close. Like, even DRX and Damwon, like DRX, yeah, they dropped a game to Nongshim, but Liv Sandbox also lost to, like, I forget who.
They lost to Nongshim.
Yeah,
yeah,
they lost
so
to
it's
Nongshim.
like, you know, you never know. Like, all these teams are going to drop random series and they're going to look bad on a certain day, but, like, when it comes to playoffs, like, I could definitely see, like, Damwon beat KT randomly or DRX beat Liv Sandbox randomly.
Yeah.
Like, in a best of 5, who knows what these teams will look like in good form in best of 5s. Like, which team is going to be best in best of 5s? We have so much data on Gen G and T1, but, like, what about Liv Sandbox and KT? I think it's really interesting to consider, you know, who's going to be ready to go when it comes playoff time.
And I just want to round it out, because I think that's the beauty of it, is that point about who's ready to go playoff time. Because I actually think that our top 6 at the moment are in the best place. We saw the dichotomy, as Chronicler mentioned earlier. Yesterday was Saturday, our time, and we had Harmer Life versus Fred at Breon, and some of the most frustrating League of Legends to watch. Yeah, some of the most of all time, absolutely. But then we had Liv Sandbox versus KT, which was an absolute treat. It was just a pleasure to watch. Like, the hands on display, the fact that KT won 3 games but lost 2 of them was like really cool to see.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Liv Sandbox is just making sure that I don't fully trust them.
Yeah. Like,
it helps.
I mean, we all saw Ashley Kang fall into the trap of getting excited. She tweeted about it, and I think that she might have actually been paid off by Liv Sandbox to do that, because, you know, she knows. She knows, and
She should know.
it was actually it was a fantastic troll if it was a troll, and the fact that it also just
Immediately
caused the
backfires.
immediate collapse of KT was just beautifully done. But we of course mean no real shade. Ashley, we love you. Anyway, I just think that our top 6 teams are in a really good spot, outside of maybe DRX, who are a little bit shaky. At the time of recording this, we haven't seen the Kwandong series. Kwandong might be out of contention completely. They may not be. We're not entirely sure. But I think that most of us believe that it's DRX that are getting through and not going to be Kwandong. DRX need to lose all of their remaining series in order to get there. So even if Kwandong wins this evening, it is still not likely. That
DRX
they're
are,
going to take them down.
you never know what you're going to get, but I feel like it's like a counting system where they need to get a certain amount of losses out of the way, and then they can look good.
Yeah.
So they lost like a bit at the end of last season, so they came into this season looking great, and then now they lost against Nongshim, so they'll be ready for playoffs. That's my expectation.
That's what
You
it
know,
is.
like,
It's all charging up.
Liv Sandbox lost to Nongshim, and now they look like maybe they could challenge T1, which is insane, right? So next week, maybe DRX are going to challenge Gen G. Like, who knows?
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing. And I want to go back to, like, what the most interesting part of the playoffs race for me is actually sort of the middle, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because, like, T1 Gen G, it's a non-factor. I actually believe that Gen G have a higher chance of winning Worlds than they have of winning the summer final. Weirdly enough. Because the summer
You might be
final,
right, yeah.
the summer final it's almost guaranteed to be T1, and the world final is not guaranteed to be T1 in the final, and I just think that that's a kryptonite situation. But Damwon, Liv Sandbox, and KT is such a cool conversation to have, because I think Damwon are certainly struggling at this point in time, but Damwon in playoffs, like in spring, did Damwon look good? No. That best of 5 between them and Gen G, was that fun? Not for me. Lost a whole bunch of hair. However, that series was absolutely amazing. Like, that best of 5 all the way down to 5 games. Canyon puts them in a 10K hole in game 5, and then Peanut somehow hoofs his way out of it. Absolutely absurd. That was an amazing series.
We, last time, I think, all had kind of decided that it was going to be a Gen G T1 finals, and we were like, yeah, the playoffs is kind of going to be a wash. And then Damwon showed up, and we were shocked at how well they played. And then they still, of course, didn't go to the finals. This time, I feel like I'm 95% sure that Gen G is going to the finals. But T1, I'm not so sure, because T1 has looked shaky against some of the teams they will potentially face in that second round. I think what's really a possible trajectory that could be extremely hype is KT versus Damwon first round. I think we're favoring KT in that scenario based on what happened last time they met, Damwon's current form versus KT's insanely good preparation despite the loss against Liv Sandbox. Then Telecom War semifinals, where it's KT versus T1, their third meeting of the season. Both of their matchups in regular season were way closer than anyone expected. Even the first one, where KT had not actually leveled up yet, they still almost beat T1. You could argue with how some of those games were played out, they should have beaten T1, in fact. And that's the one angle I see where maybe it's actually a Gen G KT finals. I don't think we should predict that, but that's one angle I see where it's not just the, okay, yeah, playoffs will be slightly interesting to see how Gen G and T1 get to the finals. I think there might actually be an angle where we see the rise of KT, and I think Sandbox could be the same, but I think the matchup between KT and T1 is one that feels very winnable for KT. If I think about T1 versus Sandbox, I think probably not going to be winnable for Sandbox, just how stylistically these teams play. And then, of course, if it's Gen G versus KT, also feels less interesting for KT. I don't think KT could crack Gen G. But if it does end up being a Telecom War, first of all, it's Telecom War semis, so that's sick. And I do think KT have it in them to beat T1 if they match up in the semis there. So that's kind of my crazy prediction that I don't think necessarily will happen, but if it does happen, is really hype.
I mean, that is definitely out there. What that does is it puts Damwon and Sandbox up against
That'll
each
be a
other.
banger.
That sounds wacky to me.
I'm loving
Sounds
that.
like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely sounds like a lot of fun. And whenever I think about like things like this, like the Telecom War discussion, I always think about top lane. And with how Rascal was playing, I kind of see where you're coming from. just with the fact that he might be able to match Zeus if he keeps up.
I'm more
form.
about bottom side and mid lane.
Yeah,
and
I'm-
the KT versus T1 discussion.
I'm down with that. I don't. No one's gonna match Zeus. Like I just don't see it happening. I love the bravery from Wolf. My brave take that isn't really brave is I think Genji's just going to absolutely maul playoffs. I think that it's very different from what we've seen in previous splits where the team and it's after the T1 win where I'm like, I still think that if they end up facing T1 in the finals or in the semis, it will be close. But with what I've seen from Genji thus far, like I'm willing to actually say that this is a type of trajectory that we've seen in 2015, that we saw in 2020, where they're actually going to be able to finally get Ruler and Chovy their first wins.
I would agree. I'm kind of on the same page. It's hard not to get hyped about a team that nearly broke the game streak record, only tied all of the epic, amazing teams that we've had in the past.
Do they tie the plus 29 as well, or do they beat it?
I think they're going to beat it. I don't have their matchups in front of me, but it's not T1. So I'm pretty sure that they're going to 2-0-2-0.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they can drop one more game.
They're plus 27 right now. Yeah,
they can drop one more game.
Yeah.
And that is across 2 series.
And they can still beat it.
Yeah.
I think they can drop. Can't they drop 2 more?
No,
No, I
could,
think it's
'cause
exactly
Isn't it
they
plus
dropped one
31?
against- No, because they dropped one against Dom 1.
Yeah, they dropped one.
They
So
had the
now
ability
it's
to drop 2 before their Dom 1 series. So now they only have 1 left, and then they could.
If
still
they drop 2, they will tie it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which-
I know that's Atlas's dream. And it's just the record still stands.
Just add another one. I just want 2015 SKT to still have that legacy sitting there, okay? Because it's an amazing team.
Yeah.
And you can just join it. Like, everyone can just join it. You know, we've got, like, 2020 Dom 1. We've got, like, Spring T1 from this year. And now Genji can just join the plus 29 club. But I very rudely interrupted your entire little
it's
thought there,
fine.
so...
It's pretty much just that. I do think that record could be broken, and it looks very likely that at least the plus 29 will be broken based on this week. I don't know about the series in a row. I don't know if that can be broken. That's an insane streak that T1 just put on. But
That'll have to go over till next year.
Yeah.
It would.
Or something for
Which
Genji.
is really, T1 did do it, so it's possible, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that
We'll
one.
have to see if
That
any
one is
big
much more
super teams
difficult.
get built in the off season as well.
Like Nongshim Red Force.
Too soon, Brendan.
Yeah, let's.
Sorry,
we're
sorry
not
about
talking
that,
about
yeah,
that. We're
sorry.
not talking about that. What we can do is start talking about what's going to change moving towards the playoffs, because it may actually really dictate how things are going to go. Patch 12.14 is the patch that we're getting to. This is a huge one. This has already changed the meta elsewhere, as we are getting to it a little bit late. There was a time where we were trailblazers when it came to the meta here in the LCK, as far as getting to patches earlier. No longer the case. The LPL's already been there. The LEC's already been there. And so now we're moving on over. And Chronicler, I know that you have a lot of thoughts and feelings about what this patch is going to do. Let's start, I guess, with what the champion changes mean for the LCK.
So fortunately, we're the LCK, so we don't really take patch notes into account until like 2 weeks afterwards, which is a playoff hit, so we'll be fine. So in terms of champion changes, I think the one that I'm personally very excited about is the system nerfs to enchanters. Yumi got nerfed. Big thumbs up.
And Janna got nerfed.
yeah,
Isn't
and-
that great for the LCK?
Yeah. Remember that top Janna? That was a fun week. And I think the Pantheon change for me personally is pretty exciting. We also saw some nerfs to some staples that had already started to fall off a little bit. Most notably, we saw that Gangplank and Gnar both took a little bit of a hit. No Gwen nerfs, but she hasn't been too successful yet either way. So I think that is overall not the biggest of issues. And I think in terms of champions, it's an okay patch. I think the champion changes might benefit teams like Domon in the past. I don't know if it's still the case, but they were generally pretty good about using flex picks. Could see Genji try that as well.
Yep. Any other thoughts on champion changes? Maybe Valdes?
Yeah, I have a big one. Zeri didn't get nerfed. I mean, she did, but she didn't.
Not
didn't get
really.
nerfed
It was not
enough.
an impactful nerf.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why that's the case, but she didn't get nerfed. I'm very sad about that. Yumi did get nerfed, but it is pretty minor. I mean, it's just a heal nerf. I think that in general, like, yes, her sustain is annoying, but also, like, I don't know, Nami is picked with Lucian, and we have, like, noticeable sustain with her as well, but, like, it's really just about her entire kit is, like, the issue. And I was even watching LEC last night. I didn't get to watch too much LPL just because we cast at the same time.
Time slots, lol. Yeah.
But last night, some teams left open Yumi, and they got punished. And it was an issue. Twitch as well. Twitch Yumi, like, it's still really strong. I think that some of that stuff, you know, other than that, like, as you mentioned, the Pantheon change is, like, kind of nice. I think that, you know, some teams can benefit from that in the LCK. But yeah, I don't know. Other than that, it wasn't really too impactful for me. I like that Gangplank and Gnar got hit a little bit because we see that matchup
Too often.
every day, at least once. So, you know, glad to mix it up a little bit. You know, Renata Glass got nerfed as well in terms of her health. That might be, you know, picks like Kalista Mumu, especially with some of the rune changes, which we'll get into a little bit later. Can definitely have some more all-in power against that pick, so she's not just, like, blindable and just picked into every single lane, so that's kind of nice as well.
Yeah.
Kyle nerf as
Kyle.
Wolf. Anything stand out for you?
I mean, I'm really excited to see Pantheon come back to the jungle. I think he's a really fun jungle pick. We have a lot of really strong Pantheon players. My favorite Pantheon jungle player was Dread, and unfortunately he will not be joining us for playoffs, but we might get to see him play some Pantheon in the first week of 12.14 and the final week of regular season. For me, I really am with Valdes, and that I think Zeri need to be hit harder. I still think that the entirety of this playoffs is going to be dominated by Zeri, and whether she is shut down or not, which it was fun for a little bit, but it's been a while now that this is how we're playing the game, and sad about that. Also really sad that Gangplank is getting hit so hard. I think he's fallen off a little bit in terms of priority these last few weeks, and I think he's just a really exciting champion that can change the way late game is played, and he had several viable builds. We liked one more than the other, but now it's kind of like crit only, and also he's not viable, and his barrels don't do as much. So I think Gangplank is, like, dead. He's gone. I don't think we'll be seeing him at all. And that's sad for me because I thought he was one fun champion that is very difficult to counter in terms of matchups. I think watching the skill-based plays, we've seen so many good Gangplank players, including Zeus, who, again, is still probably going to get MVP.
Shout-outs to Dudu, solo carrying on the game.
Yeah, I mean, we won't see those moments, unfortunately, anymore, at least not for a while, in my opinion. So kind of sad about that. But happy to see that otherwise we are seeing some slow movement away from the meta being the same. And Pantheon jungle, I think, will really help hard dives on the bottom side, because we were just Trundle Poppy. That's it for a long time down in the 3v3 meta. With Pantheon, I think there's a lot more power in mid, bottom side, and it'll be just more action in general.
How about Rise Pantheon? That sounds fun.
Oh, God.
Let's just everybody go bot. That sounds fun.
Talia
Five
also
people,
didn't really get hit either. So,
Yeah.
I think Talia Pantheon, even though it's not nearly as strong as it was, because of how Talia was changed, is still a combo that can still be
And
picked. And
Renekton.
we actually, I think we saw it picked yesterday in the, I think it was picked in one of the LEC matches as well. Yeah, Renekton as well. But I wonder what will end up happening, because I think that even though Yumi and Zeri, like Yumi got hit, Zeri got kind of changed, but the part we all hate, which is W, like, didn't, right? I don't really have a problem with Zeri scaling really well and being like a late game teamfight menace. But it's the same reason why we all hated Corki, especially in the LCK, where the pace can be a little bit lower and games can just be decided by poke.
Also, that escape. Maybe we take a look
But
at that.
yeah,
mobility,
I
I
think
think.
it's fine to especially late game, like, kind of bring them down as well. But the truly obnoxious part of the kit didn't get hit at all. But
Her ult bonus magic damage got hit by 5.
yeah,
Oh, well then,
That's it.
I think she's unplayable, personally.
That's literally it.
But-
Like, that's the only change.
Did you see
that changes her.
Gumayusi's double kill with the ult? That
Yeah.
may have almost not killed.
If you watch the
had
LFL,
the-
you can see AP Zeri in mid. That's fun.
it's not. It's horrible.
Oh,
I
God.
hate it. But I think this is a good segue into the more substantial part of this patch and why the fact that Yuumi and Zeri are hit, but maybe not hit as hard as we'd like, might not be the end of the world.
All right. Do you want to get into it then? We're gonna go like keystones and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because I think that something we have seen ever since the durability patch is that the late game team fights have gotten way better. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but like I've been loving the amount of actual long, crazy team fights that we've had.
Yeah.
But it has come at the cost of early game. And we love our cookies in the LCK. We love our time warp tonics. All of that's nerfed. Pots, nerfed. Biscuits, nerfed. Bone plating, nerfed. Like every single second wind nerfed.
Second wind, yeah.
Scorch got buffed.
Scorch
5 damage.
Scorch buffs. But like, and the interesting thing is, the 5 damage sounds like kind of mean. But then if you take that into account, the fact that like maybe Airy and Comet lanes are going to be strong again because sustain has been hit so hard across the board. Also some nerfs to like things like conditioning, which gave a lot of free stats when you hit the 12-minute mark. Unflinching being kind of a mandatory rune on every single champion that went resolve, and even a lot of champions going resolve secondary just to get access to that has been nerfed as well, leading to less amounts of tenacity being available. Challenging smite getting nerfed, which really does kind of make me sad as a jungler, but also fair because junglers were not recently, I think, in pro play.
It's not as relevant as it used to be since the durability patch.
Exactly.
I actually think that like what's on the actual patch notes, like Riot's description for challenging smite, makes a whole lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah, and I also think that in solo queue it's a very different scenario. So I think that nerf, based on how the jungle role has evolved, like junglers actually 1v1ing laners hasn't happened in like quite a while, right? I feel like last year we still saw some of that. But
We saw it yesterday.
We saw it yesterday, yeah.
I actually
Depends on the game
I'm
state.
kind of the
Yeah,
other
I
way.
mean-
Like I think that's the one change that we're looking at here on the list that really I don't like is the challenging smite change, because I think it just allows junglers to be a little bit more impactful and keeps top laners honest. It's usually top lane or a side lane where this becomes a thing where if a jungler gets ahead, sometimes we've seen junglers get 2 kills, 3 kills like a Viego, and you're like, well, that's unfortunate because he can't carry and he won't be able to make a huge impact around the lane. Too bad it didn't go to the AD carry or the mid laner. And I think challenging smite allowed you to have those flashy moments if you were ahead as a jungler a little bit harder in pro play, of course. I think, it's a good change for solo queue.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit sad about that. What I like about these patch notes in general for the like systems and these runes is that it really feels like Riot has decided like you can't just get a free lane. You can't just sit there and be like, yeah, we took that bad trade, but we'll just heal it up. It doesn't matter because this is really about a macro thing. Yeah, and I think that like these runes, the cookies, the potions, the time warp tonic, these things just kind of make it so that your laning is so forgivable, and I think it just hones more 2v2, 1v1 action around the map that is impactful. You can't just randomly hook as an all and be like, well, I potted and like, who cares? It's like, no, actually, that actually will come back to bite you now if you mess that up.
Trades matter.
Yeah,
Moo
very
buffs.
Yeah, exactly. Very short. So
buffs.
like I can think of Sylas, Akali, Gangplank, like all these champions that have insane mid to late games. Gwen is another example that basically just were able to get through. Like Gangplank specifically got hit in the nerf department as well. But I think the fact that Sylas was blindable into like ranged matchups because he just didn't have to care about the early laning phase at all it was a really bad sign for the game. So I really like these changes.
100%.
And I think that making laning more relevant is a good look.
Yeah, because it's, if you look at one change, it might look small, like you were talking about the Scorch thing, but it's like 2 pages worth of like 20 different changes and nerfs to sustain, buffs to damage, and, the Amumu buff thing is actually pretty big because I was talking about Renata Glass before, but like if you get all in, like you might just die now as Renata, but not just that, like you're not going to be able to heal up. The second bandage toss is coming, you're going to lose the lane, just based on that. So you better just be better. And a lot of our LCK teams get away with just sitting there and just not laning, basically. It's that can't be a thing anymore.
Yeah, and it rewards proactive play, and if you're on the losing side of a matchup, you have to play safer, you have to respect it, you can't just blind these matchups like Chronicler was saying and be like, nah, it doesn't really matter because no one's going to gank me, it's durability, it's fine, we're just going to heal up and I'll be relevant later. I like that we don't just skip that now, and I think that so much of our weaker teams have insane mechanics that they were honed in solo queue, they were picked up, go to challengers, come to the LCK, and you might not ever see that because they just are sitting in lane and killing minions. But now, actually, I think some of our players who are weaker in terms of the macro sense, and teams that are weaker in macro, it might be able to show some of their power elsewhere in the early parts of the laning phase. It just makes the laning phase relevant, and I like that.
I'm excited for Delight. Players like Delight, that can just look for aggressive trades. They're not necessarily the best shot callers or anything, but they have sick mechanics. And, he's on Fred Brion, but he's actually in a fantastic
For
place.
now.
I think he's insane.
There's a reason why this player was part of like a roster with Zeus and Owner on T1 back in the day when he still was Crescent, right? Like it's not that shocking, but carry exists, so who cares?
Yeah.
I also think that this is going to hurt teams like KT in mid specifically, because I think Vicli's post laning phase has been exceptional, but in laning phase, he's definitely taken his fair share of subpar trades. It's a nerf to Dove because his laning isn't great, and that in general, I think Liv Sandbox really is a team that tries to skip the laning phase as much as possible in favor of
buff to
and they fail to almost every time, right? Like, Liv Sandbox are a team that fall down reliably 2,000 gold almost every single game.
Closer's a good laner.
Closer
Closer will have fun.
Actually, Closer, this split has been good.
Maybe
and also
he
I
can
think
carry
Prince
through
and-
mid. Maybe
Prince
he can
and
like
Cal
pick more.
actually-
Maybe
yeah.
he'll just like play Aurelia
And-
every game, or like maybe play like Akali, Aurelia, Silas. Like,
kind of.
imagine trying to ban out Closer and he becomes like the sickest mid laner now because of this.
That's
knows,
true, actually. Maybe like Aurelia has a way back into the meta,
I think she
given
did
the
get
changes and
buffed or changed. There was like a, or no, that was a different patch. Sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
I was reading
Bowblading got
11.14 this morning. I'm like, that Aurelia? I didn't hear about that.
It is early in the morning here on a Sunday.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the one to say it. I feel like this patch hurts Guma and Keria a little bit. I think their laning has been pretty they're still like up there. They're one of the best bottom duos, but compared to the other ones nearby, like, it has been a little bit suspect in the lane sometimes.
And we want to get into like what it means for all of the teams, but we do need to talk about one last thing about the patch, which is relatively large, and that is Shelly and Shirley's gigantic resurgence in power, as well as some very tanky dragons that give you a whole lot of really fun stuff, and what this is going to mean for how the early game's going to play out. Because to echo Wolf's point just a little bit, T1's spring style of fight every herald, win every lane, kind of seems like with these changes is going to be kind of good.
Yeah, so to summarize, Drakes do less damage, but they take way longer to go down, have gotten very substantial health buffs. So you can't just sneak a dragon by yourself anymore as a jungler, which in pro play didn't happen that often, but still we often see a jungler like start it up, and then by the time his lane arrives, dragon is half health, enemy team can't really respond. That shouldn't really be a thing anymore. And
Just
the
play
buffs,
Kha'Zix.
Hey,
Maybe the
there we
Kha'Zix
go.
quick
return.
Q max,
Yeah.
yeah. Shyvana jungle, bring it back.
Some of these
Where's
objectives,
where's my Warwick at?
Yeah.
No,
Warwick,
but
I don't think he's in the game anymore. I don't know.
yeah, he exists.
That's
I
my
think.
favorite maybe character in
Remember
Arcane
Lilia?
patches.
Good times.
But every single the buffs are humongous for individual drakes. So individual drakes matter way more. And then the other huge thing is that surely like the health is I think fun, but because of all the percentage health damage things that exist for both Shirley and Shelly, it's not as relevant. But the gold that you get, which to be precise,
Old Dragon is back.
Old Dragon is back. I didn't like we fight over every herald, and I think now you kind of have to. But I also think that the fact that like champions like Zeri could just always, if you were smart, trade very favorably for herald no matter what, kind of made it a little bit boring. I have no idea if this means that it's just going to be early game and laning phase dominance, because I also think we won't know until like a few weeks later, because changes like this, we saw this with durability patch as well, are
Yeah.
always going to take a fair amount of time to really settle in.
I think maybe we'll have to watch other regions to figure that out as well, because we don't change very fast.
I like this change of the Rift Herald in the local gold for solo queue, because I think a lot of teams just focus on their lane, or a lot of players just focus on their lanes in general. And like for low level play, if you're a jungler, you're like, ooh, I don't know if I want to take the Herald because I'm probably going to do it by myself. My team isn't going to come. They have no reason to, because they're just focusing on winning the 1v1 or winning the bottom 2v2. And then you're like, I hope the jungler doesn't show up because I'm at half health because I'm trying to do this by myself, and my team also isn't helping me set up vision. And now your team has a reason to come. So for the game, very good. For pro play, I really hate this change, actually, because I think it forces teams who have comps that aren't strong on Herald to fight for Herald, which then just leads to more snowbally games when they lose it. Or maybe teams that are more scaling oriented, or teams that aren't good at fighting in early skirmishes, just can't be drafted anymore, because you have to fight around early Drake and early Herald as much as possible. We might even see a lot of dragon fights, I think, pre-level 6, because you want to make sure you can get the dragon, then set up your lane, and then go to Herald. So I think we're going to see a lot of fights for both objectives early and less trades of objectives. I think trading for objectives was, for me, one of the most fun parts of this meta, because both teams would be like, what does the Drake mean for my comp and the temple we have? What does the Herald mean? What does the gold mean? Teams could make active decisions to slow the Drake down, then try to trade objectives so they could avoid a fight. There was a lot more macro there and a lot more decision-making that I thought was really good for the game and good for two different styles of comp. One more focused on the early games, one more focused on the late game. Now it might just be we move away from the scaling and everybody's just fighting all the time. And I think that our weaker teams in the LCK, it's not going to affect playoffs as much. I think our strong teams will figure it out very quickly. But I think the weaker teams will just coin flip a lot. And we will just have games that are decided at 12 minutes or less. And it'll just be sad. And I'm not happy about that.
Yeah, it's tough. I think that with the changes to, like, Herald being local gold is actually a solution where maybe if we do see a lot of champions like Tristana or top lane split pushers come back, and an enemy team throws multiple people over to a Herald to try and maximize the gold, you're actually, in theory, should be able to also trade better cross-map then, right? Because if they commit people to actually get the gold, then... But I think in practice, what Wolf is saying is going to be the case. It's just going to be Herald flips. And I think that we had a pretty good balance of early comp versus late comp in the game right now, at least in the LCK, right? Where like Kalista was viable, there was a ton of early game presence or pressure lanes that were good, but also we saw a lot of scaling elements. And I'm a little worried that balance will be kind of shifted, and then it will just be Gen.G or whichever team. Right now it's Gen.G. Whichever team has the strongest lane is just stomps lane, gets Drake and Herald, and immediately wins the game.
Yeah, and the system changes also haven't really helped as far as stopping people from picking early game, right? Yikes.
Yeah, in a sense that can be fun, but I'm kind of with Wolf on this one, where I think it's going to be just going to simmer the game down to a very similar consistency kind of every game,
What it was previous to the durability patch. Kind of.
Yeah,
like
kind of.
early
Like,
game.
going back to what Max said, like, it's kind of just going to be T1 Spring, where you fight in your lanes, you win, and then you take everything and you win, and even the second Rift Herald is better, so you want to get that as well. You want to fight over that for the local gold, but also for the extra push power, potentially. Just the fact that it has a harder time of being denied, you're going to get that second charge regardless. And even if you give up a Drake, it's like, well, they got some extra stats, but, like, 3 extra ability haste is not going to, like, it's nothing compared to, like, even if you look at the gold, in terms of what it's worth in terms of gold, like 3 ability haste is not going to be worth like 200 gold, at least off the top of my head. So it's like, I don't know. I think we're just going to be seeing like crazy fights all the time, and it's going to be really fun. But I just hope that it doesn't mean that now, like, yeah, some of the dragon buffs will be scaling, and they are, but like, the way that we play it here in the LCK, I think it's just going to be like, the better team is going to win the fight, and then they're going to win the game.
I think it's a buff to the LPL's playstyle as well. But we're not here to talk about Worlds in this episode.
Not yet.
I think that there could be a resurgence of poke in this meta because of how important the Drake and the Herald are, and like you don't want to take it necessarily because your fight or your team fight comp doesn't want to like just run in there and fight it. So you're
Zoe
like
buffs pause champ.
Zoe, maybe Varus could come back. Lux, I think, could be really strong. Even
Varus
Xerath, like
buffed.
these kind of enchanter bottom lanes where you're poking and putting the pressure on Karthus. Like these types of champions, I think could be good at slowing down these takes. So then maybe your top laner gets a little bit of extra push, grabs an extra plate, while the dragon fight is happening. Stuff like that, I think, could be fun. We just don't know yet.
Yeah.
And it takes so
I'm
much
hoping.
longer to do Drake.
That's the
So,
thing. Like, you were talking about like the fact that
either you give it up or you totally commit. Like,
Yeah,
there's
and it's
no
like 5
in
minutes
between.
spawn, 8 minutes spawn, right? And so like trading for objectives, Wolf, you were saying like that becomes more difficult. Maybe with the fact that you can prevent Dragon from being
Yeah, I
taken
think-
early so easily, with the fact that it takes so long and so much commitment. I
Yeah.
think there's going to be an intense fight for either, depending on which team wants it or a trade.
I actually think that due to Drake being a lot more durable, like doing it actually at 5 minutes is going to be a lot harder.
Yeah,
You're
we're not going to have like Olaf taking
no,
it every
exactly.
game. You know?
And maybe that means that we will see trades, and in that way, like we talked about, I do agree with like specifically the ability ace, for example, looks pretty lackluster. But getting instead of 6, getting 9% bonus armor and magic resist on a Mountain Drake, like that's bonkers value, right? I don't think it will be enough to offset what a Herald will offer. But I don't want the meta to just be Callista and Pantheon and like nothing else. Because I think what you were talking about with the poke champions as well, that assumes that the poke champion gets like an item, right? I'm worried that we won't even get there. That like it's literally it's a level 6 spike, it's the Herald fight, and if you don't win it, then
But you have to win it
boomed.
very hard, right? Because like if you want to get like maximum gold, like if it's going to be 1,000 gold, everyone has to be alive.
yeah, I but that's generally like
You're
I feel like
expecting that we're just going to have like a 5v5 5-zip wipe.
remember spring.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how that's how
I mean,
our
I
region
remember
does it.
dragon fights back in the day when games were just over, when a dragon was taken. Like, there's a reason why we have elemental drakes now.
Hey, at least we
there are
have
drakes.
elemental drakes that we actually get to kind of talk about. Because right now, I can't remember the last time we've ever like made a color point about like, well, they got that extra resistance from the one mountain drake they picked up. We don't even discuss it. It's like not even a thing. It's like, okay, which one is it? When we see the first two elementals, we're like, which one is not the soul? It's these two, and then we're like, okay, the soul is important later, and we're like, which soul did we get? And that kind of RNG element means that if you commit to drakes early and it's a bad soul, now at least you get some better stats out of those. Cloud is still just a tragedy, or Ocean is still
Ocean
a
is
tragedy.
a tragedy.
Yeah,
I was going to
Ocean is
say,
still
like,
a tragedy,
Wolf,
but
how dare you? You are.
no, Ocean is
you are
still
on
a
the Pog
tragedy,
State.
but like at least those individual elemental drakes feel like they're worth it to commit for early, even in their own stats more now than before.
Even Ocean got buffed because
I mean, it got buffed, yeah, the 1%, yeah.
But it's still, the same. It's still the same thing.
No, due to the sustained nerfs.
Yeah.
Every other form of sustain got nerfed. So actually, by
So
proxy,
now
it
it's
got
actually a
the same.
bigger
no, it got
buff.
me
Yeah.
got me valuable because your opponent will have less sustain by default.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be
All right, that's a big
difference
that's a
maker.
big brain way to try to look at it. Like,
I mean,
still think it's not that important.
No,
but,
I mean, I still think it's the worst one.
Yeah.
by
but it's
far.
but I didn't think about it that way.
Maybe
I
it'll
like
help.
your line of thinking there.
Maybe it'll help. I'm not an Ocean Drake fan, so I want Hex.
I'm an
every
Ocean
time.
Rift fan because it does make
It
the
is
Rift
pretty.
very pretty.
Come on.
I mean, that's the main thing. I mean,
we know.
Cloud Rift is the best.
We know.
But still.
Now the rifts don't matter because the game is over at 8 minutes.
Hey,
We won't even
Hey,
get there. Like,
maybe second Herald.
the drakes
fight,
won't be
there's still
taken.
something
We have
happening.
games now where drakes are not taken until like 11 or 12 minutes.
Except if
unless it's
Fred
Fred
So now-
Brion, yeah.
Well,
Unless if it's Fred Brion.
I think
so
we're
now,
moving
like,
away
they're
from that,
stronger,
though.
but it's more difficult. So,
Yeah.
we were moving away from that, but who knows what's going to happen now with all the extra health the drakes have.
yeah.
It can end up. Maybe it'll end up being good. Maybe it'll end up like shifting the balance a little bit, but late game is still viable. Maybe because of the laning phases, like Azir is now the king. If you're Chovy,
So now you were talking about how Ocean Drake buff could be good because there's less sustain. Does that actually, in a weird way, because sustain is worse, make sustain champions better?
no, because sustain champions across the board also got nerfed.
They're also nerfed.
Yeah,
but
there's like
because you have less sustain now, you need it more. So now you need a Yumi?
And maybe if every
Don't think
sustain
this way,
is,
Valdes.
if every sustain is not sustained, maybe some sustain is sustained now.
Did you ever think about that?
Does heal value go up big time?
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it anymore. Let's
No
go
more
on to the
ghosts.
next. Let's go on to the next part. Let's talk about what 12-14 actually means for our teams heading into playoffs.
Well, it's one easy one. I'm going to get it out of the way right now.
All right, do it.
Genji's Busto. They're winning every lane besides top. Don't mention that one. So hard, and they're already snowballing the best out of any of our teams. And they're going to do it even better now because Sustain has been nerfed. They have the best laning mid laner,
The best
in the
jungler
LCK,
and the best bottom.
Well, I
lane.
mean, like I think I'd even feel confident saying that, like when it comes to pure laning, Chovy's probably just the best mid in the world. I don't want to claim that he's
the best
mid.
laner in the world.
The
Has
laner in
been
the
for
world,
like 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah, well, so if you then get nerfs to Sustain and laning is made more relevant because of the prevalence of early objectives, I think that's nuts. I also think that for Sandbox, it's going to be a really tough time because generally the early game is very binary, and now those miracle comebacks are going to be way harder. So those are my like quick takes.
Another quick take, I think KT gets a huge buff. Because even though Vikla gets nerfed, Rascal is going to be picking only dominant laners, like Lee Sin has to be perma-nerfed against him, and top priority is going to be more important because we need to fight over every Rift Herald.
I think that, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think Guma, Keria have had some pretty weak laning this season, so not that it'll give them any problems until they face Genji necessarily, but it could be, when you consider that Ruler is the strongest part of Genji right now in this meta, Chovy obviously very close second, versus Guma, Keria having some shaky lanes in terms of trading in particular, where they've actually been forced out of lane several times this season, even in matchups where, like, Guma's on Draven and it's expected that he will be winning it, they're not. So I think this hits T1 pretty hard. I do agree on the sentiment of Rip Sandbox. Not going to be a great patch for them, I don't think. But I think Genji's ability to cross-map is one of their greatest strengths this season, and I think it's something we don't talk about as much because it's not as cool as like Chovy having like 30 CS up, Doran holding the aggro topside, and then Peanut just changing the entire way we look at the jungle this season. But I think their cross-map plays, even when they give up objectives, has been amazing. So I think they're going to be the fastest team to figure out how do you just give a Herald and then get something somewhere else? How do you actually get an early Drake and make that work? How do you draft a composition that does that? They have Score. He's been a great coach for them this season. I think this patch solidifies in my mind that Genji is the favorites to win this tournament 100%. Like, I think they are the biggest winners of this, and it's unfortunate for anyone who stands in their way.
I counter you. Wait till Zeus locks in Yorick. See what happens. Oh
no!
I'd be taking counter right now.
And you know what? Along those lines, LeBlanc got buffed and Faker. Yeah. Even though for a long time he was
closer.
Or
yes,
Chovy.
and closer. Yeah, but you know, Faker as well had a very illustrious career as a lane dominant player, and even though nowadays he's more of a facilitator, maybe this will be a spark for him to be like, I'm going Scorch, like crazy all in Aurelia, like who knows? You know, maybe T1 changed their style. Like you never know.
It's really interesting because I do agree with you, Wolf, that like Guma and Keria take a little bit of a hit, but the top side of T1 is probably still the best in the league just because of how good Zeus and Owner are as a 1-2 and how Faker as a facilitator
Speaking of Lee
still
Sin
is
needing to be perma-banned, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, what if this brings back Jace? I don't want to think about that, but
I mean,
do wanna
when
think
Wolf
about that,
said
please.
poke,
More
I was
interesting top lanes.
terrified. I was terrified
Yeah.
of Zeus' Jace.
Yeah, so in that way, I think especially after seeing the series where Doran, was it Genji, where he had a really rough time? I think it was.
I mean, he has had a few roughies.
Well, but like I feel like Doran is the guy, like he was kind of rough at the beginning, then he was really good in the middle, and then like the last few matches we've seen him be.
I think
kind
he's
of more of a-
still
He's been
being
good
very good.
recently,
He's
yeah.
still being very good in the last couple of series, and also like when he can play champions like Akali and things like this that he has really excelled on, then I think that Doran does look good.
Yeah, but he went like, didn't he go like 0-5? I'm like think of like an 0-5 Gangplank game, like
I think it was
That was
0-3,
Dudu.
but yeah.
Wasn't
0-3 against Dumb I think.
Yeah, no, I think
Ah.
he went like 0-3
No, Double.
against.
So I remember that one as
I think it's the Dom 1 series, yeah. And he went like 0-3.
I maybe getting an extra way to try and leverage that pressure might help teams against Genji. I don't think it's going to be enough, but I think it's an interesting discussion to have. Ties into what we were talking about earlier as well, where on top side I still think T1 has the edge, but overall, I do agree with Wolf, like Genji's basically doing what T1 did last split, where they're perma-prioed every time. Every lane is always shoved in, so it makes any other play really easy with the exception of top. For Damwon, no clue what it means. No idea. I can't.
I think it's a mega buff, personally. I think if you can play Pantheon mid lane, then it opens up a whole sea of AP junglers, and Canyon is our best AP jungler by about 1 million miles. And like, but like he could bring out all sorts of different picks, right? Like Lily is not that terrible, you know. Like there are a lot of different choices.
Karthus again, please.
I mean, Karthus, Talia, Fiddlesticks. Chronicler, there we go.
Yeah.
Are they the buzzwords you're looking for?
Yeah.
Are those picks though that can take Rift Herald at 8 minutes?
Absolutely.
Fiddle
I don't
can.
know. Fiddle maybe, not
obviously.
Karthus.
Yeah, I don't. I actually think that Damwon and DRX are like.
So my
we're
hot
looking
take
at it-
is that DRX gets mega buffed because Beryl and Deft are probably our best early laning duo lane in the LCK as far as
when
early pressure.
Ruler exists. You really
Yeah, no.
think
So Ruler does most of his carrying mid to late, and has actually lost lane to Deft and Beryl before.
And
I know
also
this
early.
is. I mean, recently yes, but
Yes.
I do think that Deft and Beryl have been good at pushing early, creating good trades, and having good pressure.
They have been good at Callisto lanes, yeah. I think that's the one. Like that's the one where I'm like, yeah, 100%. But other lanes, I don't know.
But I mean, early game is the way that they have
Callisto's
been
not
able
getting
to
played
take
on the
control.
Yeah, she's going to be
No,
banned every
she's
game.
definitely permanent. But
Yeah.
Caitlyn, you know, like maybe we can bring back
I'm
some like
hoping that
laning
comes back.
duos, right?
Yeah.
Guma
Bio
hears you
lanes.
and likes that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Gumayushi's like a fantastic Caitlyn. But I think, Deft has always had a really good one. He's always been able to lane effectively. I think Zeka as well has been having a great split, might be able to, use this to create some power. And any way to hide Pyoshik as much as possible sounds good. And if you give power to lanes, sounds good for Derek.
What about
Kingan's
the
not
smites?
a great
You don't
laner
need
either.
smite if you kill them all.
I think that for me, both Damwon and DRX have looked really lost through a lot of the changes that have happened this season. Like when DRX was at their peak, when they were a top 4, arguably even top 3 team in the early part of the season, was when they were playing Azir, Kalista every game, and they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they did the same thing really well. They mastered it. They were fantastic at it. Every patch that came out subsequently, they almost figured it out by the time it was the next patch. And I think that both of these teams have been very slow to adapt. They're on poor form right now, and I think they will be the biggest losers of our playoff teams because, yeah, I think unlocking some AP junglers for Canyon could be good in theory. I think the laning arguments you were making, Max, as well for Deft, could be good in theory. And I think, especially if it was regular season, I'd be like, yeah, there's a lot of power there. I mean, they can definitely smash a lot of the teams and could go, close with teams like KT and Live Sandbox, but it's playoffs, right? And I think that this patch is going to be such a big change and will change the way the game is played so significantly that I just don't think these teams are going to adapt fast enough. And I think it's already pretty strong for KT and Sandbox, and then T1 and Genji are in their own tier. But I think we could see very one-sided losses for both DRX and Damwon in playoffs. That's my expectation right now.
Ooh, betting against Damwon in playoffs, that's dangerous.
I don't know. This feels like a hot take at this desk, but I actually think it's a big buff for Damwon. Not because of
I
Canyon.
agree, but me agreeing might be a bad thing.
You and I,
I have no idea. I don't know.
I feel
can't read Damwon
yeah,
at
I'm
all.
not even. Canyon aside, I think the champion changes will benefit Damwon across the board. I just think that Nuguri has shown that he can lane really strongly, and this might be his chance to be I'm only playing Jace now. And that's a scary thought. Maybe he plays only Jace Kennen every game based on what he's going for. And then Showmaker, I think he has been a little bit muted because of the durability patch. I think that now he can get more aggressive. He can dominate lane more. He was always a challenger to Chovy in terms of
He's had a
somebody
pretty good
who can
LeBlanc
lane-
in the past, I seem to remember.
Somebody
Hear
who
me
can
out.
lane really well. So I think it's
Ares.
actually and Bible's a really proactive, Bibles like a really proactive support. So like I think that maybe they can draft some more aggressive lanes instead of Duck Dom playing Aphelios every game. I don't know. I think it's going to be a good look for Damwon personally.
Hot take on that note, really quick. Before I just want to say, I just want to add one thing. I think Nuggery's laning phase has not been good. I think his laning phase recently has been very poor, and I think has been a huge hole for Damwon. Like it was much better earlier on the season, and I think maybe I'm being a little bit more critical because it's crunch time now, and we've had a lot of like really glaring eyes on Damwon. Like, wow, it's time to really shape up. You might get knocked out of playoffs. So they've gotten through that part. They will go to playoffs, but I think Nuggery's laning phase has not really been dominant recently. Again, we talk about Nuggery as this player has been incredible in lane in the past, but I think we have to kind of remember what year it is and what time it is, and also the opponents he faces in playoffs. Like if you think about half of the LCK he smashes them, but the other half it could go either way. That's where I get concerned.
I think that there's a couple of thoughts I have. Like I feel like it's kind of matchup dependent for him, so I think that the potential change for like he looks really good on Sejuani and Tanar. Like that's pretty much what we've seen so far. I think that the potential matchup changes based on the change in meta could really benefit him, and the fact that like maybe Jace, maybe some of these more aggressive picks come in and he can feel more open to that. And also that he has not looked good because he's always just like perma-trading. You know, like his forward percentage is probably number one. I don't have the number in front of me.
It is.
But
it was for a long time at least.
Yeah, he's like always perma-trading, so I feel like that meta change will also benefit him. So maybe if the meta favors a lot of trading and it favors a change in picks in the top side, like I think so far he has not. I kind of agree. Like he hasn't been that amazing, but like I think it could really benefit him. So that's like where I was coming from.
Yeah, it's also not the meta, right, for being able to like win trade, win lane. You know,
I just have like I just want everyone to
Let
get
him
excited. What everybody should just get excited about Showmaker with Aerie Syndra and Scorch 5 damage buff.
There you go.
You know, maybe that's what brings Syndra back. The sustainer bone platings is like taking off some
10-second nerf,
damage.
yeah.
You know,
Well, now that I've heard from Chronicler and the Valdes analyst about why they think I might be wrong about
No,
Damwon,
I
I feel
don't-
more solidified in my position.
I don't have a take.
I'm glad it's a
'cause
controversial take because I'm very excited to see what Damwon will do.
I have no
Yeah.
idea.
'Cause who knows? Maybe
'Cause-
they will just
yeah.
fall flat. You know.
yeah.
No clue.
I've been betting on Damwon, and I've been wrong for the last 4 times, I think.
Until week 9.
And I'm doing it again. I'm gonna do it again. I'm just ready. I'm ready for them to come back. I know it's gonna happen. It might be 2024, but I'm just gonna keep betting on it and just hoping that I'm calling the dip over and over again. That's what I'm doing. I'm just calling the dip. Like, yeah, we're on the rise
Eventually,
again.
you're
don't worry.
right.
They had
Yeah,
a
yeah.
good series against
Can't go to
Gen G.
0.
I'm just
right?
dollar cost averaging. You know,
there you
just
I think that one thing I will say as well, one final thought on Damwon for me, because I know I've talked about this a lot. I hope that I'm wrong, and I hope we do see a resurgence of one of our big, massive, famous teams at the
One
LCK.
of the big 3.
Yeah, big 3. And, like, this team is going to Worlds pretty much 100%. So I want them to have a good look on this patch, even if they don't make semis, even if they don't go to the finals. Like, I want them to be in top form, because when people who don't watch the LCK think about the LCK, a lot of them think about Damwon because they're our most recent LCK Worlds champion. So hoping the form is good.
yeah. And I remember when Damwon went to play-ins in 2019. That was actually a great year for like watching the LCK dominate.
Barrels Alistair.
Because Barrels, Alistair,
times.
Nuggery just picking Klepto into everyone and just destroying them.
Yeah, there's a lot of interviews around the time where I was like, yeah, Damwon's just murdering everyone in script. And obviously
Yeah.
they weren't able to actually match that performance until next year, but it was quite fun. I'm just preemptively sad for Sandbox on this patch. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't savored the moments that I've had with them well enough. You know, like I feel like
You were always doubting them.
Yeah,
let me just tell you, you've been fine. You've absolutely savored the moments with Sandbox Chronicler all season long. We guarantee
I
it.
don't know if I have.
Yeah, maybe this patch is the reality check you need.
I don't think it's ever happening.
Or maybe it's just that they're just too Sandbox to be changed, to be phased by this patch, and they just sandbox their way through it,
They're
and it's
just
fine.
stats. Who cares?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
just numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, this affects the opposition as well. Yeah, so my hot take is that DRX are going to look better. which is insane, I know, but maybe it'll be a thing. But I think we've this episode has definitely gone a very long time because, of course, we've had to talk about a lot of things. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. We will be back again a few times at least before the end of the year, so do not worry. You will get your fix of more Pog State, and thankfully, now that we're all healthy, we're going to be able to film more for it. Yeah, exactly. Stupid COVID. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Stay classy, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Pog State.